How was your day? Whatever emotions you're bringing in, curiosity, stress, fatigue, it's okay. This is your space to rest. You don't need to do anything right now. Just be here. Before we begin our journey together, if you find comfort in these sleep stories, a gentle like or subscribe helps others discover this peaceful space too. But for now, just settle in and let yourself unwind. Perhaps your mind has been racing with thoughts, deadlines, or worries. Perhaps you've been carrying the weight of decisions, conversations, or simply the accumulated moments of another day. Let all of that settle now. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to solve. The world will continue its turning while you take this time for yourself. Tonight, we'll journey together to a distant mountainside in the Ural Mountains of Russia, to a place where snow falls in perpetual silence and the wind carries stories across vast wilderness. It's a place of mystery, yes, but also of remarkable human spirit, where 9 young people once ventured with dreams of adventure and discovery. Their story has puzzled investigators for decades, not because it's frightening, but because it reminds us how much we still don't understand about the natural world around us. As we explore this mystery together, you can simply listen and let your breathing slow. You don't need to remember details or solve anything. Just let the story wash over you like falling snow, gentle, persistent, peaceful. Sometimes the most compelling mysteries are not about horror or fear, but about the unexpected ways nature moves through our world. In the winter of 1959, the Soviet Union was a land of industrial ambition and youthful optimism. At the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, now called Yekaterinburg, students filled lecture halls and dormitories with the energy of post-war renewal. Among them was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student whose passion extended far beyond circuit boards and mathematical equations. Igor was a natural leader, thoughtful and methodical, with a kind of quiet confidence that drew others to him. He had spent years developing his skills as a mountaineer and cross-country skier, earning his Grade 2 certification in winter camping, a significant achievement that spoke to hundreds of hours spent in harsh conditions, learning to read weather patterns, understanding snow loads, and developing the physical and mental resilience required for serious expeditions. But Igor dreamed of something more ambitious. He wanted to earn the highest possible certification, Grade 3, which required completing an expedition of exceptional difficulty. Such journeys were not undertaken lightly in the Soviet system. They required official approval, detailed route planning, and demonstrated competence in advanced winter survival techniques. The destination Igor chose was Mount Otorten, a peak in the northern Urals whose name, in the language of the indigenous Mansi people, means "don't go there." But this wasn't a warning born of supernatural fear. Rather, it reflected the practical wisdom of a people who had lived in these mountains for generations, understanding that certain areas presented particular challenges during winter months. The Mansi were skilled hunters and reindeer herders who knew intimately which valleys provided shelter and which ridges caught the worst winds. Igor assembled his team carefully, selecting friends and fellow students who shared his passion for winter exploration. There was Lyudmila Dubinina, a 20-year-old economics student known for her cheerful determination and skill with skis. Alexander Kolovatov, studying mechanical engineering, was valued for his technical knowledge and steady temperament. Zenaida Kolmogorova, also studying radio engineering, brought meticulous organizational skills and had proven herself on previous expeditions. The team included Yuri Doroshenko, a student of radio engineering known for his humor and mechanical aptitude, and Yuri Krivonishenko, studying construction engineering, who had experience in challenging terrains. Rustem Slobodan was pursuing economics while maintaining his passion for outdoor adventures. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, a graduate student, brought additional experience to the group. The final addition to their group was Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old sports instructor who had fought in World War II. His presence added valuable experience to what was otherwise a young team. Zolotaryov had joined the expedition late in the planning process, and his military background and older age provided a different perspective on leadership and risk management. The planned route would cover approximately 190 miles over 16 days, crossing some of the most remote terrain in the northern Urals. This was Category 3 difficulty, the highest classification, meaning they would face temperatures dropping as low as -30 degrees Celsius, winds that could reach 60 miles per hour, and terrain that challenged even experienced mountaineers. In the weeks before departure, the team gathered regularly to plan their expedition in detail. They studied topographical maps, calculated food and fuel requirements, and checked and rechecked their equipment. Each member was responsible for specific gear and supplies, from cooking equipment to emergency medical supplies. They also needed to arrange for regular check-ins with their home base, as Soviet expedition protocols required communication at predetermined intervals. Their departure was set for January 23, 1959. The expedition was even given official recognition as a celebration of the 21st Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, a detail that suggests the institutional support behind what might seem like a simple student adventure. These were not reckless thrill-seekers, but serious athletes and academics undertaking a carefully planned expedition with proper authorization. The night before departure, the team made final preparations. They laid out their gear systematically, double-checked their food supplies, and reviewed their route one last time. Tomorrow, they would board a train that would take them north toward the edge of the inhabited world, toward valleys where reindeer herds moved through forests of birch and fir, toward mountains where indigenous peoples had maintained traditional ways of life for countless generations. None of them could have imagined that their names would become part of one of the 20th century's most enduring mysteries. They were simply 9 young people, skilled and enthusiastic, ready to test themselves against the magnificent challenge of the winter wilderness. Their cameras captured their excitement and determination as they prepared for what they expected to be the adventure of their lifetimes. January 23rd, 1959, dawned cold and clear in Sverdlovsk. The team gathered at the railway station with their massive backpacks, skis, and enough supplies for over 2 weeks in the wilderness. Their mood was festive. Photographs from that morning show young faces bright with anticipation, group shots where they're laughing and joking with the easy camaraderie of friends embarking on a grand adventure. The train journey north took them through increasingly wild landscape. Towns grew smaller and farther apart, and the forests grew denser. They entertained themselves during the long hours. Someone had brought a mandolin, and they took turns playing songs and sharing stories. According to later accounts from fellow passengers, they were a remarkably cheerful and well-organized group, clearly experienced in expedition travel. On January 25th, they arrived in Ivdel, a town at the edge of civilization in the northern reaches of Sverdlovsk Oblast. Ivdel was primarily a logging and mining community, surrounded by vast taiga forests. From here, they caught a truck to Vijay, an even smaller settlement that represented the last inhabited place before the true wilderness began. Vijay was little more than a collection of log buildings and work camps, but it served as a crucial supply point for the logging operations that extracted timber from the surrounding forests. The team spent their last night in civilization here, making final adjustments to their packs and enjoying what would be their last warm meal prepared by someone else. On January 27th, they began hiking north toward Mount Otorten. The early days of the trek proceeded exactly as planned. Their route took them through rolling forests of birch, fir, and cedar trees. The snow varied in depth, sometimes only a few feet, sometimes requiring them to break trail through drifts that reached their waists. Their skiing experience served them well as they maintained a steady pace through terrain that would have been nearly impassable for less experienced travellers. The group maintained detailed journals and took hundreds of photographs documenting their progress. These records, later recovered by investigators, reveal a team functioning smoothly and enjoying their expedition. Zenaida Kolmogorova wrote enthusiastically about the beautiful landscapes they encountered and the excellent teamwork they maintained even in challenging conditions. On January 28th, however, the group faced their first significant challenge. Yuri, one of the team members, began experiencing severe pain from pre-existing health conditions, including rheumatism and joint problems. After consultation with the group, it became clear that he would not be able to continue safely. This was a difficult decision. Yudin was a valued member of the team and a close friend to many of them. But Igor Dyatlov and the team made the responsible choice. Yudin would return to civilization while the remaining 9 continued toward Mount Otorten. They helped him prepare for his solo journey back, sharing supplies and ensuring he had everything needed for a safe return trip. It was an emotional farewell. They had trained together for months and had been looking forward to completing this challenging expedition as a complete team. This decision quite literally saved Yudin's life, though none of them knew it at the time. Years later, he would be the only surviving member of the original group, carrying their memory and serving as a crucial source of information about their preparations and mindset. He remembered them as confident, well-prepared, and excited about the challenges ahead. The now 9-member team continued northward through increasingly remote terrain. They encountered occasional signs of the indigenous Mansi people, marks on trees, traces of temporary camps, evidence of reindeer herds moving through the area. The Mansi had been using these valleys and mountains for seasonal hunting and reindeer herding for generations, following traditional routes that changed with weather patterns and animal movements. The team cached surplus supplies at strategic points along their route, following standard expedition protocol. This allowed them to reduce their pack weights for the most challenging portions of the trek while ensuring they would have adequate food and fuel for their return journey. Each cache was carefully marked and recorded in their maps and journals. On January 31st, they reached a valley where they established their most significant supply cache. They were now in truly remote wilderness, farther from any settlement than some of them had ever been. The silence here was profound, broken only by wind in the trees, the sound of their skis moving through snow, and their own voices as they set up camp each evening. The landscape around them was both beautiful and severe. Rolling hills covered in deep snow stretched toward distant peaks. The forest provided some shelter from wind, but also created navigation challenges as visibility was often limited to just a few hundred yards in any direction. They relied on compass bearings and their topographical maps to maintain their planned route. February 1st brought a change in weather conditions. Snow began falling more heavily, and wind started building from the west. These were not unusual conditions for the season and location, but they required the team to adjust their plans. Instead of continuing directly toward Mount Otorten as originally intended, they found themselves pushed westward by the weather, eventually ending up on the slopes of a different mountain, Kholat Shakhl. Kholat Shakhl means dead mountain in the Mansi language, but this name didn't necessarily carry ominous connotations. The Mansi naming system often reflected practical observations about terrain, mountains that were particularly exposed to wind, valleys that were difficult to cross, or areas where hunting was typically poor. Dead Mountain likely simply meant a place where game was scarce, or conditions were challenging. As afternoon moved toward evening on February 1st, the team faced a critical decision. The weather was deteriorating and they needed to establish camp. The prudent choice would have been to descend into the forest where they could find shelter among the trees. But for reasons that can only be reconstructed from the evidence they left behind, they chose to camp on the mountain slope itself. The decision to camp on the slope of Kholat Shakhl rather than descending to the shelter of the forest below, has puzzled investigators for decades. These were experienced mountaineers who understood the basic principles of winter camping: seek shelter, avoid exposed ridges, protect against wind. Yet their final photographs and the physical evidence discovered later suggest they deliberately chose to establish their camp on the mountainside. Several factors may have influenced this decision. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, with increasing wind and snowfall that would have made navigation more difficult as darkness approached. Descending in poor visibility always carries risks, particularly in unfamiliar terrain where hidden obstacles or sudden drops might not be visible until too late. Additionally, the team may have been trying to maintain their planned schedule. Experienced expeditions often face pressure to stay en route and on timeline, particularly when dealing with predetermined supply caches and expected return dates. The decision to camp high might have reflected a calculation that losing a day to weather would create larger problems later in their expedition. To create a suitable campsite on the slope, the team needed to modify the terrain. They cut into the snow and underlying slope to create a flat platform for their large tent. This was standard procedure for winter camping in mountainous terrain. A properly prepared site was essential for both safety and comfort. The work required would have taken significant time and effort, involving all team members in digging and levelling. Their tent was a large military-style canvas shelter designed to accommodate all 9 team members. Setting it up in wind required careful coordination and proper anchoring. The last photographs from their cameras show the tent being erected against a backdrop of blowing snow and grey skies, images that capture both the challenging conditions and the team's methodical approach to establishing their camp. Inside the tent, they arranged their gear with the efficiency born of a weeks of practice. Sleeping bags were rolled out, cooking equipment was set up, and food was prepared for their evening meal. Despite the harsh conditions outside, the tent provided a surprisingly comfortable shelter. Canvas tents of this era, when properly erected, could maintain livable temperatures even in severe cold through the combined warmth of multiple occupants and small heating devices. The team's journal entries from this day reveal no particular concern about their situation. They noted the weather conditions matter-of-factly and recorded their progress toward Mount Otorten. These were not people who felt they were in immediate danger. Rather, they seemed to view their circumstances as simply another challenge to be managed through skill and preparation. As evening settled over the mountain, temperatures began dropping toward their nighttime low of -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. Wind continued building, creating the characteristic sounds of high-altitude camping: the rhythmic flapping of canvas, the whistle of air moving through guy lines, the subtle creaking of snow under pressure. The team prepared for sleep in the systematic way experienced winter campers develop. Extra clothing was arranged within easy reach, boots were positioned to prevent freezing, and emergency gear was kept accessible. They had spent many nights in similar conditions during their training expeditions, and their routine was well established. What happened next has been the subject of scientific investigation, criminal inquiry, and endless speculation for more than 60 years. But the physical evidence left behind tells a story that, while incomplete, provides important clues about the forces that transformed this routine winter camping experience into tragedy. At some point during the night, investigators believe it was between 9 in the evening and midnight, based on the stopped watches found with the bodies, something caused the entire team to abandon their tent with extreme urgency. The tent was found cut open from the inside, with large tears that appeared to have been made with knives. These were not small openings that might have been created by accident, but deliberate cuts large enough for people to exit quickly. The scene inside the tent, as discovered by searchers weeks later, suggested sudden departure. Personal belongings remained in place, including valuable items and warm clothing that would have been essential for survival outside. Boots, coats, and other protective gear were left behind. The arrangement of items suggested the occupants had been resting or sleeping when whatever happened occurred. Outside the tent, investigators found footprints leading away from the campsite toward the forest below. These tracks, preserved in snow for the weeks between the incident and the arrival of search teams, told a remarkable story. 9 sets of prints led downhill, but they showed that most of the team members had left the tent wearing only socks, single boots, or bare feet, completely inadequate for survival in sub-zero temperatures. The footprints followed a relatively direct path from the tent toward a large cedar tree at the forest edge, approximately 1.5 kilometers away. This wasn't random wandering, it appeared to be purposeful movement toward a specific destination. The depth and spacing of the track suggested the team was moving together, not scattered in panic. What could cause 9 experienced winter campers to abandon their shelter so completely? What force or threat could be so immediate and compelling that they would choose almost certain death from exposure over remaining in their tent? These questions have driven decades of investigation, theory, and scientific research into one of the most puzzling incidents in mountaineering history. For 3 weeks after the Dyatlov team's planned return date, no one was particularly concerned. Expeditions of this type often ran behind schedule due to weather or unexpected terrain challenges. Radio communication was not expected until the team reached predetermined checkpoints, and delays were common enough to be considered normal rather than alarming. But when February 20th passed without word from the team, concern began growing at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Igor Dyatlov was known for his meticulous planning and reliable communication. The fact that he had not sent word by the expected date was unusual enough to warrant investigation. Family members and fellow students pressed for action, and by February 22nd, official search efforts began. The search was organized through a combination of institutional resources and volunteer efforts. The Ural Polytechnic Institute provided logistical support and coordination, while local authorities offered official backing and additional personnel. Students and faculty volunteered for what was initially expected to be a routine rescue operation, finding a delayed expedition and providing assistance for their return. The first search teams departed by aircraft to conduct aerial reconnaissance of the planned route. Flying over the vast wilderness of the northern Urals in winter was challenging even for experienced pilots. The landscape below was an almost featureless expanse of white, broken only by dark lines of rivers and forests. Spotting a single tent or small group of people from the air required ideal conditions and considerable skill. Meanwhile, ground teams began working their way north along the Dyatlov team's known route. These searchers included experienced mountaineers and local guides familiar with the terrain. They followed the same path the expedition had taken, checking supply caches and looking for signs of the team's passage. On February 26th, one of the aerial search teams made the first significant discovery. Pilot Boris Podyajenko spotted something unusual on the slope of Kholat-Syakhl, a dark object partially covered by snow that didn't match the natural terrain. When the search team reached the site, they found the Dyatlov expedition's tent, collapsed and nearly buried by accumulated snow. The condition of the tent immediately indicated that something had gone seriously wrong. The shelter was cut open in several places, with tiers large enough for people to exit through. These cuts had been made from inside the tent, suggesting the occupants had deliberately destroyed their shelter to escape. Inside, searchers found most of the team's equipment and personal belongings apparently undisturbed. Most disturbing was the discovery of footprints leading away from the tent. In the preserved snow, investigators could see clear evidence that 9 people had left the campsite, but most were inadequately dressed for the conditions. Some tracks showed bare feet or single boots, while others indicated people wearing only socks. For experienced winter campers to venture out in such conditions suggested extreme urgency or duress. The search teams immediately began following the tracks downhill toward the forest. The trail led in a generally straight line toward a large cedar tree visible at the edge of the woods, about 1.5 kilometers from the tent. This purposeful direction suggested the team had a specific destination in mind, rather than fleeing in random panic. At the cedar tree, searchers made the first tragic discovery. The bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko were found beneath the tree, both wearing only underwear. They had clearly died from hypothermia, but the scene around them told a more complex story. The remains of a small fire suggested they had attempted to create warmth, and broken branches high up in the cedar tree indicated that at least one of them had climbed 12 to 15 feet up the trunk. This detail, the broken branches high in the tree, provided an important clue about the team's state of mind and circumstances. Climbing a tree in sub-zero temperatures while inadequately clothed would have required desperate motivation. Investigators theorized that whoever climbed the cedar was trying to observe something, possibly looking back toward their abandoned tent or scanning for some form of threat or rescue. Over the following days, searchers found 3 more bodies scattered along a line between the cedar tree and the original tent location. Igor Dyatlov was discovered about 300 meters from the tree, lying face up in the snow with his hands positioned as if he'd been trying to dig or climb. His position suggested he had been attempting to return to the tent when he succumbed to the cold. Zenaida Kolmogorova was found farther up the slope, also positioned as if she'd been trying to return to the tent. Near her was Rustem Slobodin, who showed signs of having fallen multiple times before his death. All 3 of these team members had died from hypothermia, but their positions indicated they had retained enough consciousness and purpose to attempt returning to their shelter. The discovery of 5 bodies accounted for just over half the expedition team. 4 members remained missing, and intensive searching continued through the remaining winter months. The remote location and deep snow made the search extremely challenging, requiring specialized equipment and experienced personnel working in harsh conditions that tested their own survival skills. It wasn't until May, when spring snowmelt began revealing previously hidden areas, that the remaining 4 bodies were discovered. A Mansi hunter found evidence of what appeared to be an improvised snow shelter in a ravine about 50 meters from the cedar tree. When investigators excavated this site, they found the bodies of Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. These 4 had clearly survived longer than their companions who died of hypothermia. They had managed to construct some form of shelter, and had even removed clothing from their deceased friends in an attempt to stay warm, a grim but entirely rational survival strategy. However, their injuries suggested they had faced different and more severe trauma than simple exposure to cold. The Soviet criminal investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident began within days of discovering the tent and the first bodies. Senior investigator Lev Nikitich Ivanov was assigned to lead the inquiry, supported by medical examiners, forensic specialists, and a team of experienced criminal investigators. Their mandate was to determine whether a crime had been committed, and if so, to identify those responsible. The initial autopsy results on the first 5 bodies, those found between February 27th and March 5th, revealed death by hypothermia, which was consistent with the circumstances of their discovery. However, several details raised questions. Yuri Krivonishenko had 3rd-degree burns on his hands and feet that couldn't be explained by the small fire found at the cedar tree. Yuri Doroshenko showed signs of pulmonary edema consistent with trauma, and Igor Dyatlov had evidence of minor internal bleeding. When the final 4 bodies were discovered and examined in May, the investigation took a dramatically different turn. These team members had suffered severe physical trauma that could not be attributed to exposure or falling. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a major skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov both had multiple broken ribs and severe chest trauma. Alexander Kolevatov showed evidence of neck injuries and deformation. Most puzzling was the condition of Lyudmila Dubinina's body. She was found missing her tongue and eyes, injuries that sparked immediate speculation about possible violence or predation. However, experienced pathologists noted that these soft tissue injuries could result from natural decomposition processes, particularly in the presence of flowing water, which was present in the ravine where she was found. The force required to create the chest and skull injuries observed in the final 4 victims was estimated to be equivalent to a powerful automobile collision. This level of trauma seemed inconsistent with a fall or exposure scenario, leading investigators to consider various forms of external force, yet there was no evidence of defensive wounds, struggle, or human combat that would suggest an attack by people. Complicating the investigation further was the discovery of radioactive contamination on some of the victims' clothing. The levels detected were relatively low, but raised immediate questions about possible military involvement or weapons testing. However, this contamination was later traced to Alexander Kolevatov's previous work in cleaning up after the Kishtim nuclear disaster of 1957, and to Semyon Zolotaryov's possible exposure to radioactive materials during his military service. Investigator Ivanov and his team interviewed dozens of people, including family members, fellow students, military personnel, and local residents. They examined weather records, consulted with avalanche experts, and investigated various theories ranging from natural disasters to military accidents to criminal activity. Despite months of intensive investigation, they could find no evidence of foul play or human intervention. The official conclusion, reached in May of 1959, stated that the deaths were caused by a compelling natural force. This deliberately vague language reflected the investigators' inability to identify a specific cause, while acknowledging that some powerful external factor had clearly been involved. The case was officially closed and the files were classified, contributing to decades of speculation and conspiracy theories. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the incident. Military testing theories suggested the team encountered secret weapons experiments, possibly involving new forms of rockets, radioactive materials, or other classified projects. The presence of military installations in the broader region and the Soviet Union's active development of nuclear and conventional weapons during this period gave credence to such speculation. Paranormal theories emerged almost immediately, ranging from encounters with the Yeti or similar cryptid creatures to UFO sightings and extraterrestrial contact. These theories were fueled by the unusual injuries, the team's apparent panic, and some ambiguous photographs found on their cameras that could be interpreted as showing unknown figures or lights. Natural disaster theories focused on various weather-related phenomena that might explain the incident. Proposed causes included sudden avalanches, katabatic winds, powerful downslope winds that can reach hurricane force, temperature inversions that create dangerous conditions, or combinations of weather factors that created a life-threatening emergency. Infrasound theories suggested that unusual acoustic phenomena might have triggered panic behavior in the team. Infrasound, sound frequencies below human hearing range, can create feelings of unease, disorientation, and fear in some people. Strong winds moving over particular terrain formations can generate infrasound, potentially explaining why experienced mountaineers might have fled their shelter in apparent terror. Animal attack theories considered the possibility that the team encountered large predators such as bears, which might have been emerging from hibernation, or aggressive reindeer. However, the lack of animal tracks around the site and the specific patterns of injury made this explanation less compelling to most investigators. Each theory attempted to account for different aspects of the evidence, but none provided a complete explanation that satisfied all the observed facts. The combination of the team's apparent panic, their inadequate dress for the conditions, the severe trauma suffered by some members, and the lack of clear evidence for any specific cause created a puzzle that resisted simple solution. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation using modern forensic techniques and updated scientific understanding. This new inquiry focused specifically on three potential natural causes: traditional avalanches, slab avalanches, and hurricane-force winds. The reopened investigation explicitly excluded the possibility of criminal activity, concluding that no evidence supported theories of murder or military involvement. In 2021, more than 60 years after the tragedy, two Swiss researchers published a study that brought new scientific rigor to understanding the Dyatlov Pass incident. Johann Gaume, head of the Snow and Avalanche Simulation Laboratory at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and Alexander Puzrin, a geotechnical engineer at ETH Zurich, used advanced computer modeling to test the delayed avalanche theory that had been proposed but never fully validated. Their research began with a careful reconstruction of the conditions on Kholat Syakhl on the night of February 1st through 2nd, 1959. Using historical weather records, topographical surveys, and snow science principles, they created detailed models of how snow would have accumulated and behaved on the mountainside. This scientific approach represented a significant advance over previous investigations that had relied primarily on speculation and limited forensic evidence. The key insight in their research involved understanding how the team's own actions in preparing their campsite might have contributed to creating avalanche conditions. When the hikers cut into the slope to create a flat platform for their tent, they altered the snow stability in subtle but potentially significant ways. This excavation created what snow scientists call a cut slope, a vertical or near-vertical face in the snowpack that can serve as a weak point under certain conditions. The researchers then modelled how wind-transported snow would have accumulated above the tent location throughout the evening and night. Katabatic winds, powerful downslope airflows driven by gravity and temperature differences, can transport large quantities of snow over considerable distances, depositing it in specific areas based on terrain features and wind patterns. Their calculations showed that several hours after the team established their camp, enough wind-blown snow could have accumulated above their tent site to create the conditions for what's known as a slab avalanche. Unlike the dramatic avalanches often seen in movies or television, slab avalanches can be relatively small but extremely dangerous. They occur when a cohesive layer of snow breaks away from underlying layers and slides downhill as a solid mass. The timing element was crucial to their theory. The researchers demonstrated that there could be a significant delay, potentially 9 hours or more, between when the conditions for avalanche release were created and when the avalanche actually occurred. This delay explained why the team had time to settle into their tent and begin sleeping before disaster struck. To test their theoretical models, Gaume and Puzrin used sophisticated computer simulations that incorporated data from automotive crash testing and even animation techniques developed for the Disney movie Frozen. These diverse sources provided information about how snow behaves under impact and how human bodies respond to sudden forces, data that was essential for determining whether a slab avalanche could create the specific injuries observed in the victims. Their simulations showed that a relatively small slab avalanche, involving perhaps only a few cubic meters of dense snow, could generate enough force to cause severe trauma while leaving minimal visible traces on the landscape. The impact would have been sudden and powerful enough to cause the chest and skull injuries found in the final 4 victims, while also explaining why the entire team felt compelled to evacuate their tent immediately. The avalanche theory also provided a logical explanation for the team's behavior after leaving the tent. Experienced mountaineers know that after one avalanche, the risk of additional slides increases significantly. The team's decision to move away from the slope and toward the forest would have been entirely rational. They were seeking safer ground where subsequent avalanches couldn't reach them. The researchers' work gained additional support from subsequent expeditions to the Dyatlov Pass area. In 2022, investigators observed fresh slab avalanches occurring on the same slopes under similar weather conditions, providing empirical evidence that the theoretical models were accurate. These observations confirmed that Kholat Shakhl was indeed avalanche terrain, despite its relatively modest slopes. Critics of the avalanche theory raised several points that the Swiss researchers acknowledged but didn't consider fatal to their hypothesis. The lack of visible avalanche debris when searchers arrived weeks later could be explained by wind redistribution of snow and normal settling processes. The gap between when the team cut their tent and when they fled could be explained by the delayed release mechanism their models demonstrated. The question of why the team cut their tent open from the inside rather than using the normal entrance could reflect the urgency of their situation. If they were partially buried by snow, or if the tent entrance was blocked, cutting through the canvas might have been the fastest way to escape. The specific pattern of cuts, large enough for rapid exit, supported this emergency evacuation scenario. What the avalanche theory couldn't fully explain was why the team remained so inadequately dressed for their flight from the tent. Even in an emergency, experienced winter campers would typically grab essential items like boots and coats if any opportunity existed. This aspect of the incident suggested either extreme urgency or some additional factor that prevented normal emergency procedures. However, the Swiss research represented the most comprehensive scientific analysis of the incident to date. Their work was published in Communications, Earth and Environment, a peer-reviewed journal, and their methodology was scrutinized by other experts in snow science and avalanche dynamics. While not claiming to have definitively solved the mystery, their research provided a plausible, evidence-based explanation for the core elements of the tragedy. The scientific approach also revealed how much our understanding of snow dynamics and mountain weather has advanced since 1959. The original Soviet investigators, working with the knowledge and technology available at the time, couldn't have conducted the sophisticated modelling and analysis that became possible decades later. Modern snow science, computer simulation capabilities, and accumulated knowledge from thousands of avalanche incidents worldwide provided tools that simply didn't exist for the original investigation. In 2020, Russian prosecutors officially concluded their renewed investigation by accepting the delayed slab avalanche theory as the most likely explanation for the deaths. This official determination brought a measure of closure to a case that had remained officially unsolved for over 60 years, though it didn't end all speculation and debate about the incident. The Dyatlov Pass incident continues to fascinate researchers, mountaineers, and mystery enthusiasts around the world. Part of its enduring appeal lies in how it represents the intersection of human ambition and natural forces. 9 young people pursuing their dreams of adventure and achievement, encountering circumstances they couldn't have anticipated or prepared for. Their story reminds us that even with careful planning, extensive experience and modern equipment, the natural world retains the power to surprise and humble us. Mountains, weather and snow operate according to complex principles that we're still working to understand fully. The Dyatlov team made reasonable decisions based on their knowledge and experience, yet encountered a combination of circumstances that proved fatal. The incident also illustrates how scientific understanding evolves over time. What seemed inexplicable in 1959 became comprehensible through advances in multiple fields: snow science, computer modelling, meteorology, and forensic analysis. The mystery endured not because supernatural forces were involved, but because the natural forces at work were more subtle and complex than investigators initially realised. Today, The Dyatlov Pass area is marked by a memorial to the 9 team members who died there. Their names are preserved in the Dyatlov Foundation, established to continue research into the incident and maintain the memory of these young explorers. The pass itself is now named after Igor Dyatlov, ensuring that their expedition, planned as a celebration of human determination and skill, is remembered alongside the tragedy that ended it. The photographs recovered from their cameras show us their final days. Young faces bright with excitement and determination, friends working together to overcome challenges, people pursuing their passion for exploration and adventure. These images remind us that the Dyatlov team were not just victims of a mysterious incident, but accomplished individuals who lived their lives with courage and purpose. Their legacy extends beyond the mystery of their deaths to inspire continued research into mountain safety, snow dynamics, and wilderness survival. Mountain rescue organizations study their case to better understand how weather and terrain can create unexpected dangers. Their story serves as both a cautionary tale and a tribute to the spirit of exploration that drives people to test themselves against the natural world. In the end, the Dyatlov Pass incident may represent something more profound than simply a tragic accident or mysterious death. It reminds us of our relationship with the wilderness, how it calls to us with its beauty and challenge, how it tests our skills and determination, and how it ultimately operates according to principles larger and more complex than our individual understanding. The 9 members of the Dyatlov expedition ventured into the Winter Mountains with dreams of accomplishment and discovery. They found adventure beyond anything they had imagined, and their story continues to inspire others to explore, to question, and to seek understanding of the forces that shape our world. Their names, Igor, Lyudmila, Alexander, Zinaida, Yuri, Rustem, Nikolai, Semyon, and the second Yuri, are preserved not just as victims of tragedy, but as symbols of human curiosity and the courage to venture into the unknown. The snow continues to fall on Kholat Syakhl, as it has for countless winters. The wind still moves across those slopes, carrying stories and memories through the vast silence of the northern Urals, and somewhere in that endless white landscape, the spirit of exploration and discovery that drove 9 young people to attempt something extraordinary continues to call to others who dream of testing themselves against the magnificent challenges of the natural world. Today, if you were to travel to that remote mountainside in the northern Urals, you would find a place both unchanged and transformed by the passage of time. The landscape itself remains as it was in 1959, rolling hills covered in deep snow for most of the year, forests of birch and fir stretching toward distant peaks, and that profound silence that exists only in truly wild places. But now there is also a memorial. A simple stone marker stands near the area where the tent was found, bearing the names of the 9 who died there: Igor Dyatlov, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonishenko, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. The memorial is often covered with flowers left by visitors, researchers, mountaineers, and curious travelers who come to pay their respects to these young explorers. The Dyatlov Foundation, established in Yekaterinburg, continues to preserve their memory and support ongoing research into the incident. In their museum, you can see the actual equipment recovered from the expedition: cameras, journals, clothing, and personal items that tell the story of their final days. These artifacts speak not of mystery and fear, but of careful preparation, friendship, and the excitement of shared adventure. Scientists and researchers still visit the pass regularly, drawn not by conspiracy theories or supernatural speculation, but by genuine scientific curiosity about snow dynamics, mountain weather, and the complex interactions between human beings and extreme environments. Each expedition adds to our understanding of how mountains behave, how weather patterns develop, and how we can better prepare future adventurers for the challenges they will face. The indigenous Mansi people, whose traditional lands encompass this region, continue their seasonal movements through these mountains. Their reindeer herds still follow ancient migration routes, and their knowledge of weather signs and terrain hazards remains invaluable to modern researchers. The respectful relationship between the Mansi and visiting scientists demonstrates how traditional wisdom and modern investigation can complement each other. In recent years, climate change has begun to alter the conditions on Kholat-Syakhl and throughout the northern Urals. Winter temperatures fluctuate more dramatically than they did in 1959, creating different snow conditions and weather patterns. Researchers studying the Dyatlov incident have found their work increasingly relevant to understanding how changing climate affects mountain safety and avalanche risk. The story has inspired countless books, documentaries, and films, though many focus more on sensational theories than on the careful scientific work that has gradually illuminated what likely happened. The most meaningful tributes are perhaps those that honour the victims as the skilled, passionate individuals they were, rather than as mysterious figures in an unsolvable puzzle. Young mountaineers and skiers around the world continue to undertake challenging expeditions, following in the footsteps of the Dyatlov team's spirit of exploration. Modern equipment, improved weather forecasting, and better communication technology have made such expeditions safer, but they have not eliminated the fundamental appeal of testing oneself against natural challenges. The Swiss researchers who developed the avalanche theory have continued their work, applying the lessons learned from the Dyatlov case to other mountain safety challenges. Their research has contributed to better understanding of delayed avalanche triggers, helping to protect future mountaineers from similar tragic surprises. In the archives of the Ural Federal University, the records of the Dyatlov expedition remain as testament to the institution's long tradition of encouraging student exploration and achievement. New generations of students continue to plan their own expeditions, inspired by the courage and dedication of those who came before them, while benefiting from the safety knowledge gained through decades of research and experience. The meteorological data from that February night in 1959 has been analysed and reanalyzed countless times, contributing to our understanding of how extreme weather develops in mountain regions. Weather stations throughout the Urals now provide more detailed information than was available to the original expedition, helping current travellers make better decisions about when to travel and when to seek shelter. Perhaps most importantly, the story of the Dyatlov Pass has become a reminder that some of life's most profound questions don't have simple answers. The scientific explanation for what happened that night is elegant and well supported by evidence, yet it doesn't diminish the tragedy of 9 young lives cut short, or the mystery of how natural forces can combine in unexpected ways to create circumstances beyond human prediction or control. The mountain remembers all who have passed this way, the Mansi hunters following seasonal routes, the Soviet expeditions mapping geological features, the search teams who worked tirelessly in harsh conditions to bring the victims home, and the scientists who have dedicated years to understanding what happened. Each person who has stood on those slopes has contributed to the continuing story of human relationship with the wilderness. Sometimes, visitors to the memorial report an unusual sense of peace in that place. Despite the tragedy that occurred there, the mountainside doesn't feel haunted or forbidding. Instead, many describe a feeling of connection to the natural world, to the courage of explorers throughout history, and to the ongoing human quest to understand the forces that shape our planet. The northern lights still dance across winter skies above Kholat-Syakhl, just as they did on the night when 9 friends settled into their tent with plans for the next day's journey toward Mount Otorten. The aurora creates the same ethereal patterns, green and blue and silver, that have fascinated travellers in northern regions for thousands of years. Under those lights, the snow gleams with the same pristine beauty that drew the Dyatlov team into the wilderness. In the deeper meaning of their story, we find not a tale of supernatural forces or government conspiracies, but something more profound, a reminder of the courage required to pursue knowledge, to test limits, and to venture into unknown territory, whether geographical, intellectual, or spiritual. The 9 members of the Dyatlov expedition embodied this courage, and their legacy continues to inspire others to ask questions, seek answers, and never stop exploring. Their cameras captured their joy and determination in those final days, but they also captured something eternal, the human spirit of discovery that drives us to climb mountains, cross oceans, reach for stars, and constantly expand our understanding of what's possible. That spirit didn't die on the slopes of Kholat-Syakhl. It lives on in every person who chooses curiosity over fear, exploration over complacency, and the pursuit of knowledge over comfortable ignorance. And so, as you prepare to rest, let yourself be carried by the same gentle forces that move snow across mountain slopes and stars across winter skies. Let the rhythm of your breathing match the timeless pulse of wind through mountain passes. Feel the same peace that comes to all travelers when they finally reach safe shelter after a long journey through challenging terrain. The questions raised by the Dyatlov Pass incident have led to answers that extend far beyond a single tragic night. They have illuminated principles of snow science, mountain meteorology, and human psychology that help protect future adventurers. They have demonstrated how scientific method can gradually illuminate even the most puzzling events. And they have shown us that the most meaningful mysteries are often those that teach us something important about the world we inhabit. Rest now in the knowledge that curiosity and courage, the qualities that drove 9 young people to venture into the winter mountains, are among humanity's greatest strengths. Rest in the understanding that even when tragedy strikes, the pursuit of knowledge and truth continues, guided by the same spirit of exploration that has always pushed our species to grow and learn and discover. Let the eternal silence of the mountains carry you toward peaceful sleep. Let the memory of their courage inspire your dreams, and let the gentle, persistent rhythm of falling snow remind you that some forces in nature, like rest, like renewal, like the quiet satisfaction that comes from understanding, are both mysterious and completely natural, strange and utterly familiar, complex and profoundly simple. Sleep well, knowing that the mountain keeps its vigil still, that the snow continues to fall in patterns both random and purposeful, and that somewhere in the vast quiet of the northern Urals, the spirit of exploration and wonder continues to call to dreamers and adventurers, just as it always has and always will. Sleep well. Let the gentle rhythm of falling snow carry you toward peaceful rest, knowing that even in mystery there is beauty, and even in tragedy, there are stories of remarkable human courage and determination that deserve to be remembered and honoured.